Story five, actually, is the mighty wins. And the mighty wins are those macro trends in the environment that buffet every ship. Now, all businesses, I say, are like sailing ships. And you have different forms of sailing ships, the transport, the pleasure yachts, there can be lots of things. But they're not motorboats, they're sailing ships. And by definition, a sailing boat needs wind to power its sails. And these winds are the six macro trends. They're societal trends, technological, environmental, economic, political, legislative trends.
Welcome to the Expert in You podcast, the show for professional entrepreneurs, experts, authors, speakers, coaches, and consultants who are ready to elevate their business, expand their influence, and boost their bank accounts. Join us as we dive deep with industry-leading experts who share their top strategies, invaluable insights, practical tips, and personal experiences to help you achieve extraordinary growth and success. Whether you're looking to sharpen your skills, stay ahead of the curve, or find that competitive edge, this podcast is your ultimate resource for unlocking your full potential. So tune in, get inspired, grab your coffee, and let's unlock the expert in you. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Expert in You podcast. I'm your host, Dan Carden, and I'm really excited to be back with you again with my guest this week. His name is Kieran Therakin, and I'm excited to have him because we are going to dive into some conversation that I'm not sure I've really had on the show before. And very quickly, let me just tell you who he is. He is the founder of Strategy Peak Sales and Marketing Advisors. He has 30 years experience. He's a strategic marketing consultancy, and he helps companies with their strategy who want to enter new markets and scale their business. Also, he's an author, a keynote speaker, and a lecturer. So Kieran, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here.
And thanks for having me on your show.
Well, we are going to talk about leadership, charisma. We're going to talk about confidence. We're going to talk about influence in leadership. And I know that you are going to have a lot to unpack here today. So let's dive right in. Why don't you, and your book is even around this. So why don't you just give everyone a little bit of backstory and tell them kind of where you came from? And by the way, he's in Canada, where you came from and really what brought you to doing what you're doing today.
Well, it's a very roundabout, circuitous, and zigzag circle, right?
Usually is.
That's the way most careers eventually go, right? It's not, long gone are the days where you went to the coal mine at 18 and you exited when you were 62, right? But like I think the average young person now has maybe 7 or 8 careers during their lifespan, that kind of stuff. So I did a lot of different things. Right out of university, I was in commercial real estate leasing. I did sales for a number of years. I got into marketing for a while. I've run sales and marketing teams for enterprise class software companies. I spent 12 years of my life buying companies, selling companies, raising capital for companies. I've been in hundreds of boardrooms, looking at financial statements, trying to understand what the value of the business was based on the value they created for their marketplaces. And if I'm a marketing guy, that was the single best experience I had, was being in all those boardrooms, because once you get into the financials of the company, it doesn't matter what it looks like from the outside. When you look at the financials, that's the actual expert.
100%. Yes.
And at that point in time, I can tell you out of all those companies, most weren't having a very good time. They were always struggling with something. And I think that's just the nature of life, period, right? I've come to a conclusion that in the later stages of my life right now, is that there is no, and I didn't know this when I was 22, that there is no end state, right? There's only a continuum. And once you resolve, maybe your career aspirations, maybe there's other aspirations you want to go even higher. Once you get your finances in control, there's more finances you want to do. Once you have those kind of things under control completely, then health shows up and relationships show up.
Yes, the journey never ends.
It never ends. It's always a stack of things that you are dealing with, right? And
100%.
Reordering the stack. That's all that's happening.
Yes.
I never knew that at the age of 22. And so, so how did I end up here? I think it's like how you ended up where you're at. It's ultimately, I think we're probably both at a stage in our life where we get to choose what we do. We're not forced to do. what we do. So this is very enjoyable for me right now. I get to do writing. I own a sales and marketing. I own a marketing agency. And I own a marketing consultancy. And between those three things, I get to meet with all sorts of cool companies and, everything from absolute startups to established businesses. And they all have the same problem. And that is, how do I create value for my market? And how do I competitively differentiate myself so that people choose me first? And,
Yes.
and ultimately, what it came down to, and I worked with hundreds of companies at the startup stage, a lot of them out of the university and the local university. And, these engineers and scientists did not go to school to learn to sell products and services. They went to school to, to understand how the electrons move around in a in a circuit, right?
Yes.
But now they got a product and they find themselves in a position where they have to attract investment capital, have to attract clients, sell their first products, attract employees to work for them, things like that. And they probably don't have time to take a sales course. But what I've concluded is that they don't need to. They don't need to take a sales course. They just need to be able to tell a powerful story. And the story, has the ability to create a transformation narrative that people can buy into. And ultimately, I came down to 7 key stories, the primary stories, the essential stories charismatic leaders tell that can move people and mountains. And this is something that I had researched for a couple of years. And I realized that, powerful leaders, they all told the same set of 7 stories. They may have not sold all 7, but they had a common 7 that they would draw from. And the reason these 7 stories are so powerful, Anne, is that they are primal. They are primal stories that exist in everybody's minds as questions that need to be answered. And you answer them through the stories that you either make up on your own or you get somebody to answer for you. And the story is how we establish our understanding of not only ourselves and our place within the environment, but then who you are and what that means to me in my place in the environment, and how we can create value together, or whether I consider you an ally or an enemy.
Right.
This whole idea of narrative identity is so powerful that it can be very easily turned into something that allows people to be charismatic, at least more charismatic than they may have been before they employed it.
Stories are such a connector too. Everyone understands stories. And so anytime you're trying to make a point, I know I'm working on a speaking presentation right now. And anytime I talk about a point, I'm like, okay, what's the story to go with that? What's the story to go with that? Because people identify with that. They can relate to that. Information is out there, but stories are unique and stories make things memorable. So, and the other thing you kind of mentioned it, but I want to really speak to it. You work a lot with engineers and scientists, and they have a very different personality from someone like myself, who's like a promoter. And so they have a very different personality. And so this is exactly why this works so well with them, but it works with anyone, but why you really teach this to them.
And what I found was, I'm a natural extrovert, as you are. I would never have guessed this, but I've worked in large accounting firms. I've seen engineering firms go, legal firms, things like that. The most powerful leaders in all these organizations, regardless of their educational background and what they practice for a living, they're powerful communicators.
Right.
By definition, they're powerful communicators, right? And they may not have studied it, but they know how to do it.
Right.
And a good chunk of that is being able to clearly get that value proposition across, what's at stake across, the big idea across. And if they're doing it properly, they'll put that into a transformation narrative that people can bite down hard on.
Yes, I love that. Now, we talk about charismatic, but I want to ask you, do you associate being charismatic with enthusiasm, with being enthusiastic? Do you think that they're so closely aligned you almost don't know the difference?
Was it Dale Carnegie that said salesmanship is the transfer of enthusiasm?
Enthusiasm and belief, yes.
From one to another, so enthusiasm, so let's rephrase that question. The question you asked me, because I think there's a little nuance here. Ask me the question again.
If I can remember what I said,
Oh,
I
it's
said,
enthusiasm and
they're
charisma.
so closely
Yeah.
aligned, like enthusiasm and being charismatic they're so closely aligned
Yeah.
that,
So,
I mean, are the lines even blurred on which
well,
is which?
yeah, I think they're related. I don't know if they're the same thing. They're definitely related. And, enthusiasm doesn't mean rah, rah, rah. It can also be
Right.
just quiet confidence. And
Mm-hmm.
you know that they have a deep belief in what they are talking about.
Yes.
Right. So it could be that as well. This idea of enthusiasm, though, and charisma. Charisma is ultimately about not me saying how great I am. It is about getting other people to come alive.
Mm-hmm.
That's what charisma is. Charisma is this ability to light an audience up, light an individual up, to see their ultimate potential.
But they're
Or
both in energy, right? I mean,
they,
they're really both in energy.
so one of my favorite lines is, "We are in the energy transfer business."
Yes.
So I was just speaking at a conference in Jasper, which is a mountain resort here in Alberta, and you know, this was a student conference. I was one of the keynote speakers at the conference. And one of the lines that resonated with them, because I saw it back in the feedback after, was this line about, "We're in the energy transfer business."
Mm-hmm.
And my point was, you're always broadcasting.
Yeah.
You are broadcasting on a second by second, minute by minute basis. And it may not be the signal you want to broadcast unless you take control of it. So what is that signal that you want to get?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that people have always said about me is he's a high energy guy, right? And regardless
Right.
of what I thought that I wanted to convey in a keynote or a workshop or anything like that, you know what they buy into at the very beginning? This guy is a high energy guy.
Right.
I'm not going to fall asleep in this thing. It's probably going to be entertaining, right?
Yes.
And then if you can infuse that entertainment value with something that they can take away, then that's a double bonus. But and it was so disappointing to me, and at the beginning, but then I bought into it. And what the conclusion was, my insight was that people are, when they hire me as a speaker or whatever it is, facilitator, they're hiring me primarily for my entertainment value to begin with. And
Mm-hmm.
then whatever the message is after.
Right. Right. Whatever content you bring.
If I didn't have that entertainment value, I'd just be a commodity. Like
Yes.
a lot of people can talk about my subject matter. Lots of
Right.
people talk about sales, marketing, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the actual delivery of it, the context that completely changes the
Mm-hmm.
deliverable that they are buying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. So good. So let's dive into some of these stories. You wrote your book around them and you said they tell the same 7 stories. Let's
Yeah.
talk about what those are.
Well, the 7 stories, one of these 7 stories are based in religion. And I, way back then in the 70s, there was a very prominent marketing consultant in Silicon Valley. He consulted for everybody, Fairchild Semiconductor, the early days of Intel, and eventually Apple itself. His
Mm-hmm.
name was Regis McKenna. And I remember reading about Regis 30 years ago. And Regis had a great line: "Great marketing takes its cues from great religion." And that blew me away.
Mm-hmm.
At that age, I was in my, early 30s, late 20s at that point. And wow, how did that come from? And as I did my research for my book and such, there's thousands of religions today, as it exists today, as it has been over the last 13,000 years of human civilization.
Mm-hmm.
So, where we stayed in one place 13,000 years ago, stayed in one place, grew our own crops, grew our own livestock, right? We're agrarian communities. And that was the stability that you needed for religion to really flourish. Now, even though there's been thousands of religions over that time, and there's still thousands today, they've all had some kind of a life cycle. They start, they grow, and they eventually peter out, except for the big ones today. And the big ones today, at best, the oldest is going to be like 5,000 years old. That's Judaism. Christianity, which is an offshoot of the Abrahamic religion, that's about 2.1, 2.2 billion today. Islam is about 1.8, 1.9 billion adherents today. But those are all Abrahamic religions. Now, what's the fascinating part is that Judaism only has 15 million people, adherents worldwide. But each of these had the story complex that each of them have, and whether they recognize who the proponents are in the stories, things like that at the same level. Like Muslims recognize Jesus Christ, but may not recognize him as the savior, right? But as a prophet. Whereas Christians clearly recognize him as the Messiah. So you have these different things, but there's the same stories. The stories fall under these 7 categories. And whether it's those 3 big religions or Hinduism, Buddhism, which is more of a philosophy, whether it's, Zoroastrianism. And Zoroastrians were a big deal, 700, 800 years ago. Big deal, Zoroastrianism, but not anymore. But they all go to the same story complexes. But some of these religions may tell the stories more powerfully. Do you want to hear what the stories are?
Yes, I am going to take some notes.
Let's take some notes. Okay, so the stories are, right at the very beginning, creation and origin. How did this all begin? Where did this start? Who were the primary proponents? Who was against them at that point? What was the genesis for this creation? Now, remember, this is a primal story because people will want to, if they think you have any meaning to their life, positive or negative, they'll want to know how you started.
Right.
Origin. Okay. Story number 2, our identity, values, and beliefs. Who are we as people? What do we have as our most profound beliefs? What are our core values? How can we differentiate those from those people over there? The heathen, right? Those kinds of things. There's us and there's them. It's a very natural division that most humans have as they seek to make sense of their environment. So they start to compartmentalize, start to categorize, right? The word pagan comes from the early days of Christianity. It originally meant the people in the country, the countryside, right? So there's the city dwellers and then the pagans, but they're clear division again. And in marketing, in some of the marketing books you'll see is that they want to differentiate between the true believers of the marketing identity and the pagans, people that are non-believers. And in order for a company like an auto manufacturer like Mercedes to exist, you got to have true believers and you got to have pagans.
Right.
People that absolutely would never buy anything but a Mercedes, people who would absolutely never buy Mercedes. And so you got to have both those kind of things. You want to have that polarity. That's what creates the crispness of the brand, the sharp edges of the brand.
Hi, friend. I have an exciting announcement. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Expert in You podcast, but I have to ask you, have you checked out the latest issue of Expert in You magazine yet? It's jam-packed with rich content, powerful strategies, inspiring stories, and so much more to help you elevate your business and personal growth. Don't miss out. Go grab your digital copy now and join our community of experts making a difference every day. Go to expertinyoumagazine.com and check out your digital copy today. Transform your expertise into success with Expert in You magazine. It's not just a publication, it is a movement.
Story number 3 is the big idea. What's that central concept that everything else revolves around? That central organizing principle, central organizing concept. And then all the stories come around this one story. So all these stories, 7 stories, they are a standalone, but they also interlock into a storyplex. Okay, and they seek to add to, borrow from, and reinforce the adjacent stories. So it's a complex. It's not a sequence, it's a complex. Story number 4 is the enemy we face. And the enemy we face, we all need something to fight for or fight against. So in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, it's Satan, right? But, for Greenpeace, it might be, the environmentalist, what is it? Dangers that overfishing or whale hunting or whatever they're into these days. What do you fight for or what do you fight against? And there's ways to position that. If you were in the business of education, you could say, we are against adult illiteracy. Okay? Let's eradicate adult illiteracy. Or you could say, let's make sure that our adult illiteracy rate in this country is always over 99.8%. And so it's a positive frame, negative frame, but it's still the enemy, and the enemy is illiteracy.
Right.
Story 6 story 5 actually is the mighty winds. And the mighty winds are those macro trends in the environment that buffet every ship. Now, all businesses, I say, are like sailing ships. And you have different forms of sailing ships, the transport, the pleasure yachts, there be lots of things. But they're not motorboats, they're sailing ships. And by definition, a sailing boat needs wind to power its sails. And these winds are the 6 macro trends. They're societal trends, technological, environmental, economic, political, legislative trends. And they're always at play, always at play. They're always blowing, or they may have stopped for a little while. They're not blowing into your sail. They're blowing in a different way. So all of those things. I'll give you an example. In 1969, the Defense Department in the US funded a little project that allowed, I think it's 4 universities to transfer files over telecommunication lines. That was called, colloquially, DARPANET. And DARPANET was the internet in 1969. But by 1994, that was the basis of the World Wide Web. You had to create a graphical user interface, to sit on top of over the internet, right? But boom, out of nowhere, all of this innovation and invention comes about. Everything from viral contamination that you could go anywhere, you could attack any other computer to any other place, to enabling cottage businesses to become massive worldwide behemoths like eBay. eBay, started off as a little auction company, right? Selling Pez dispensers because what's his name? Pierre Amidyar, really liked collecting Pez dispensers. Well, eBay is a monumental company. But what happens with these winds is that these winds create tidal waves of opportunity, but also tsunamis of destruction in their wake. So in the 70s, I remember walking into steno pools. You remember the old steno pools days, right? And you'd have all these ladies on these IBM Selectric typewriters typing away, with the doctor's, cassette recorders, they're transcribing it. It's transcribing the dictation. Well, the internet seeded the destruction of the typewriter and the steno pool by making Google Docs available to anybody and everybody that wants it, including, low-cost things like Grammarly and spelling correction, all that kind of stuff. Who gives it to a typist anymore?
Right.
I used to take my handwritten notes in university down to the typist, and she'd type it up for me, right? And I'd pay her $20 to type it up. And no one does that anymore. Why would you? That's crazy. That's crazy stuff, right? And today, typing itself is going by the way of the dodo, because you have voice dictation that will automatically autocorrect, and then using ChatGPT, pull it all together in a cohesive narrative for you in a way that you could never do it. It just completely brings up the communication game in a completely different way. All seeded by the technological wind, right? That started in 1969. And you can go further than that. You can go to the vacuum tubes in the 40s, right? And then the transistors, and on it goes. And then it allowed for all of these things to take place. So the mighty winds, and I have a great story about this, and so on the legislative part, here in Edmonton, we used to have a company in town called the CD Rental Store. And the CD Rental Store was a place that you could compact discs. You remember compact discs, right? I don't know. My average staff is probably 25 now, 24. They may have heard of a compact disc. You and I probably used compact discs, right? So
and cassettes,
and cassettes, 8 tracks,
I have those too.
LPs. Sony Walkmans were the big deal. Let me
tell you. My gosh, I forgot about those. And
Walkmans. Oh,
iPods.
And what do you call it? So he would allow you to rent the CD. And you took it home and you ripped the tracks, right? You'd take it and download it, would give it back, and he'd rent it to somebody else, right? He did a booming business, absolutely booming business. So much so that he opened up another location in Calgary. And Calgary is a city 300 miles south of Edmonton. And he opened this up to much fanfare and a proven business model, absolutely proven business model. And he was just in time for the legislative wind. Okay, remember the 6 winds, right? The legislative wind to unveil NAFTA won, North American Free Trade Agreement won, which, and this is like, I think in 1994, which overnight outlawed the rental of music.
Oh my gosh.
But this wasn't, that wind was blowing for 2-3 years. It was being negotiated for a long time. It just didn't happen.
Right.
The seed of the internet started in 1969.
Right.
Where it happened, right? And we're seeing the seed of artificial intelligence happening right now.
Right.
This is the infancy of it.
Just the beginning.
Infancy.
Yes.
Where is this going to go? I was actually having a conversation with ChatGPT yesterday. A conversation back and forth.
I know. It's crazy. It is crazy.
So this is the infancy of this. So, so as the internet created tidal waves of opportunity and tsunamis of destruction, so will artificial intelligence. And we have to be cognizant of where those technological winds are blowing. But again, societal, technological, environmental, economic, political, and legislative winds. Those are the mighty winds. That's story number 5. Story number 6. The first 5 stories are the left-hand side of the equation. And if your audience, if your people believe it, there's a natural equal sign there. And the equal sign points to story number 6. The journey we must undertake. If all of that's true, then it's obvious we got to go here. This is what we've got to do going forward. And finally, story number 7 is the why we will win story. And why we will win, that story takes the previous 6 stories and pulls it together in a shorter meta narrative. And the meta narrative is just a shorter telling of everything, right? And the last thing you want to do is walk into a cocktail reception and say, hey, you want to hear all 7 stories? No, no, they won't come near you after that, right? That's the guy with the story. Stay away from him. But it gets to 7 stories in a very short telling. So in the book, I've actually done this. I've taken the 7 stories and I've given a narrative. And the narrative comes down to 2 or 3 pages. But the narrative also adds what we call our keystone elements. And keystone elements guarantee the win. Okay, that's why we will. So the keystones, common keystones throughout history have been things like superior God, okay, superior people, superior technology. Okay, death ground is a keystone. We have to do this or we are going to die. That's Hernan Cortez, 1519, right? And he burned the ships, right?
Right.
Those kinds of things. He didn't really burn the ships; he scuttled the ships, actually, right? But him and it was 630 men.
Right.
He went and invaded Tenochtitlan in Mexico. 2 years later, with him, the help of the local tribes, other indigenous tribes that did not like the Aztecs, and with the help of a little thing called smallpox. And I'm laughing because it's so stupid, right? They completely wiped out the Aztecs. 95% of the Aztec population died during that, especially the epidemic parts of it. But at the very beginning, they were completely able to rout the Aztec forces of 5 million Aztecs within 2 years. It was crazy. But if they didn't do that, this fire within them, they knew they were going to die. Because there was another part of this. They couldn't just go back to Spain as well, because Hernan Cortez actually mutinied with these 630 men. He mutinied, right? So the governor of Cuba, where he mutinied from, was his brother-in-law. And he was going to hang Hernan Cortez for the mutiny, because the governor of Cuba, his name was Diego something or another, right? He wanted the glory of the Mexican conquest for himself. And so there was no way out but to win. Now, so you pull all that together, you got 7 stories. And those 7 stories answer primal questions in everybody's head.
So interesting. Wow, you are a wealth of just information and knowledge. And this has been so interesting. Okay, I have been listening to you, just intrigued by so much that you've talked about. And I'm sorry if you're listening to the podcast and not seeing the video, but tell me about the picture behind you. Knowing you, Kieran, I bet you there is a story.
Well, the story behind this, what I loved about the picture, first of all, okay, so anytime you tell a story, you establish meaning within the concept. What is the
Right.
concept, right? And so the difference between a fact and a truth, okay? We operate on truths. Humans operate on truths. So a fact is true. 1 + 1 = 2. That's true. But a truth is a fact infused with meaning.
Right.
Right? So 1 + 1 was 2. Oh my God, overpopulation. Okay. Or 1 + 1 = 2. Oh my God, we haven't hit the replacement rate for humans. Right? We need 2.1. So what's the meaning that we have here? So this one, what I loved about this, okay, is actually it's a replica by this fellow here by the name of Aframo, and he's a palette artist. And I just love the vibrant colors and things like that. But more importantly, like this is very, very interesting. This is the intimacy of couples. There's at least 3 couples. There's one here and one there. It's just faded out. And this is 2 people coming together now. Have a walk on a rainy, what do you call it, street, and it looks like Central Park or something like that. That's all it was. So I really enjoyed that part of it.
It's really beautiful. But when I was first looking at it and you were kind of sitting in the way and I couldn't see the whole picture, it looked like fire. Everything looked like fire. And so I was like, that's why I was so intrigued by it. I'm like, tell me about I know there's something with this picture, but now that you moved and I can see the picture, yes, I can now see the story.
Yeah, it's and that's why I like that picture. And I've got other works of his as well. But
love it.
It's a very interesting thing. Like I was doing a small mentorship with a young lady that was just graduated from university, going to education, and she had a print art piece. Okay, a print art piece, and it's just on paper. She had done like 20 of these, something like that, and she does it for fun, but it's kind of cool, right? So I said to her, okay, here's what I want you to frame it. How much do you want for this? For $30. Okay, frame it. If you frame it, that's worth $75. Okay, if you frame it with a, what do you call it? A 1 of 20, like a scarcity,
right? Like a number. It's numbered.
Take it to $110. That's $110, $125. On the back of it, if you actually put down in a 5 paragraphs the inspiration for why you did this imprint of the art, and it's based on a painting that she did, right? What's the impression? What was the meaning behind this inspiration? Now that's $175 piece of art. Right? Because now you're getting to the head of the artist and why she painted it. So you can see the value of any concept increases, exponentially by the meaning that you attribute to it. And that's why these 7 stories are so powerful. They're powerful because they infuse the mind with truths, not a fact, truths. And the truths allow meaning to come alive, which dramatically increases the value of whatever concept you're trying to get across.
So good. So powerful. Well, I know we could talk a lot longer. This has been so interesting. 2 takeaways for people that they could go and implement right now to become better communicators, tell better stories, have more influence. What would those be, Kieran?
It's not about you. It's about them.
That's a good one.
That's the first thing. It's not about you. It's about them, right? And so just as you have these 7 stories, your customer also has their 7 stories.
Right.
Intersection of where these stories come together, the nexus of that intersection, okay, that's where value can be created. If those 2 stories don't intersect, no value. There's no possibility of value. But when they intersect, you can create value. Now, before you can create that value, you have to get them to buy into the big idea.
Right.
Then the set of key messages that support that big idea, all in a transformation story. So that's the very first thing you sell. The products and services that you deliver after that, for money, are simply the tools to enable the promise of that transformation.
Right.
So if you're focused entirely on selling that hammer, you're
right.
nearly doing as good a job as you could do this idea of selling the possibility of the hammer to complete that basement renovation, build that home,
Right.
structure that cathedral. That's what people really want. This is simply the tool to the promise of that transformation.
Yeah.
So
I always say sell the vision.
sell the vision.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. So good. One more
okay.
takeaway.
Oh, one more takeaway. I thought I gave you two takeaways. First of all,
Did you give me two?
I said it's not about you. It's not about you.
Oh, that's right. That's right. It's not about you. That's right.
Well, the other part, like there's so many different things that you could focus on. But that transformation story is probably the biggest one. And the
Yes.
person that's got to believe in that transformation story more than anybody else is you. You have
Right.
to really believe that transformation is something that is so powerful and so necessary for your prospect, for your people, for whoever it is, your family.
Yes.
That the power of your voice comes from the belief that you have in the words that you're saying.
Yeah, and that's where your also confidence shows up, and that belief shows up.
Yeah, so the words can be uttered by the identical words can be uttered by the two different people, but you will gravitate to the one with the deeper resonance of both.
So good. That's so true.
And there's some facts to back this up. The most powerful insurance agents are apparently the ones that have the most insurance for themselves and their family.
Because they believe in it.
They believe in it.
Yes. No, so good. Oh my goodness. I know we could just talk for a long time, but I want to thank you so much for being here. What do you want to drive people to, Kieran, that you have for them? What would be something that they could get from you and help get your help with?
Well, what we're doing, I'm in the middle of writing my second book right now, actually.
Okay.
It's going to be called Leadership Parables. And
congratulations.
It's a little short stories. The first book is all about the story categories that you would tell. Right. And then it's illustrated by little short stories. My second book is going to be all about little short stories about leadership. And it's everything from a paragraph to a page and a half. Right. But things that are fun, that in my company, we establish management principles through storytelling. So it's really tough to memorize a policy book.
Right.
Pretty easy to remember stories, though.
Yes.
Pretty easy to remember stories. We're wired, and enabled to remember stories. So we are very, very insistent that we tell the stories that will live on beyond a policy book and such. And so this book is going to be all about that. But if you wanted to check out the first book, 7 Essential Stories Charismatic Leaders Tell, go to Amazon, and it is it might be a whopping 99 cents for the Kindle version right now. If you want the hardcover, that'll cost you $16. But my whole thing is just to get the book out there. They're going to love the practicality of it. And if you want to get an infographic of all 7 stories for free, just come to my website, strategypeak.com, as in Mountain Peak, strategypeak.com. On the right side, there's a little button that allows you to download a full infographic that illustrates all 7 stories.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. And yes, go check out his book. Go get his book on Amazon. I already checked it out before I got on this podcast with him. And I love everything that you're doing. And I love even the niche that you work in, because there's such a need there. So thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom and your knowledge and your expertise with my audience. I appreciate it so much.
And thank you very much. Very much. My very first show in Missouri. Shocking.
Oh, okay.
Well, thanks for having me on shore. This is a lot of fun. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And everyone, again, thank you for being here. Make sure that you like the show. You share it with other people, because sharing is caring. And make sure you subscribe to the Expert in You podcast. We're really trying to build this out. We want it to become, we're in the top 10% now. We're trying to get it up to the top 1% and 2%, and we need your help to do that. So please subscribe to the show. And until next week, go rock your business. God bless you. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning in today. If you're as excited as I am about scaling up your influence, business, and bank account, then I have just the thing for you. But first, make sure you subscribe to the show. Second, make sure you share it with someone you care about, because sharing is caring. And third, head on over to join me in my next free virtual exclusive workshop, where we'll explore proven strategies to boost your business and maximize your potential. Look, it doesn't matter if you're just starting out or if you're looking to take your business to the next level. My workshops are designed for you. So head on over to expertinyouworkshop.com to reserve your spot and get ready to transform your expertise into extraordinary success. I'm looking forward to seeing you there and helping you achieve incredible growth. Until next time, make sure you're always seeking the expert in you, and God bless. Have an amazing day.